keeping to time. We're waiting for our last panel member to come. Maybe he'll come later. So, welcome to the panel on digital health. Called Leveraging Software to Lower Costs and Improve the Quality of Care. I'm Tom Gibbs from W Pharma Innovation Fund. I'll be moderating the panel. I don't need to tell this audience that we need some solutions in healthcare. Drug discovery is becoming ever more expensive and ever less productive. We have the rising health costs throughout the world, not just in the US, I speak a lot about in the US. We have the aging population problem, and so on and so forth. To quote a Swiss hospital group director, okay, so Switzerland, a pretty wealthy country, mandatory insurance, so everybody's covered. He says, either we need to decide who gets care and who doesn't, or we have to make care more affordable and accessible. So I think it's not just a US problem, it's around the world. On the pharma and medtech side, they're moving to more integrated providers, like in every industry, where service and experience are key to the product, so the product is no longer the product. And covering the whole spectrum from wellness through diagnosis and treatment to monitoring the treatment and then to care afterwards. So we have a kind of divergent view on what the scope of digital health is on this panel in our preparation call. It's not clear we're all on quite the same page there. So we'll see around the why. But in any case, it's been presented as kind of the glue to hold the pieces together of the problem. And for that, we need entrepreneurs and we need investors. So just a quick show of hands. Who out there is an entrepreneur? Great. So who's an investor? Okay, so nice mix. And of course, the panel are all investors. So our panel, we're going to focus a little on the current situation, the funding situation, how to attract investment, the challenges of digital health, and what the future might look like. None of us has a crystal ball. We'll have a stab at it. And then we'll leave some time at the end for some audience questions. So we're very lucky to have quite a broad panel today. So we have venture capital and strategic corporate venture represented. And we have Chirag from the West Coast, Emily from the East Coast, Tom from Germany, the other Tom, that's me, from Switzerland, and we're missing Greg, who's representing a French corporate venture. So without further ado, I think we should each introduce ourselves, so maybe kick off. So I work for W Pharma Innovation Fund. It's the strategic investment fund of the W Pharma Group, which is a family-owned Swiss group doing therapeutic development in oncology and infectious disease. And we use the strategic fund both as a financial vehicle, but also as a learning vehicle, so we can find out about new technologies that impact our business. So we're really excited about looking at how drugs are going to be developed in the future and how the patients are going to be treated in the future. So we invest in Series A, typically, where the companies have late pilots or early commercial activity. We're investing a ticket of 3 to 5 million per Series A round plus follow-on rounds. And final factoid is we have about 150 million under management, but we're investing off balance sheets, so we don't have fund life constraints. So,
Great. Chirag Shah with Define Ventures. We are a digital health and health tech venture fund based here in San Francisco. In fact, we actually announced the close of the fund yesterday. So we are an $87 million seed through Series B focused fund. We've made about 8 investments to date, and we like to say that the house of healthcare is being rebuilt. So there's really 5 areas that we think about as far as what digital health means to us. To Tom's point, I think everyone thinks about it a little bit differently. So I'll go through these really quickly. We talk about one being consumer gateways, so how people first access the healthcare system and how we believe that's changing. We talk about data liquidity and analytics, so that the new information that is powering all of these new digital products. We then talk about areas 3 and 4, digital therapeutics, tech-enabled services, and then the 5th would be vertical reimagination, which is the entire full stack solution. So we're actively investing across all of those sectors. Ticket size on the seed stage is between 750 and $1 million, and on the Series A and B side, generally between 2 and 6.
Thanks. Very willing to catch your breath, perhaps.
Really new from First Star Ventures. We're based in Boston. A little bit different from all the other panelists here. We're actually a tech investor. Our basically software only that we look for being technical barrier. It turns out a third of our portfolio companies end up in computational biology or digital health at the intersection of health, life science, and technology. So we invest CWC, $500K to $1 million check size, and relatively speaking, we focus more on the therapeutics and pharmaceutical side rather than the payer and provider side. A lot of the companies that we look at around like digital biomarkers or different ways using AI and data to help pharma improve their drug discovery process.
Yeah, Tom Asche, I'm part of Early Bird Health. We are a European-based healthcare fund dedicated, and we have technology funds alongside. So it's not only a healthcare name, it's a technology name as well. We have about 100 million fund investing across the entire spectrum of healthcare. We've become more and more to the conclusion that technology doesn't really matter. Outcome matters. So we are becoming more and more technology agnostic, whether it's devices, whether it's digital health, or whether that's pharma. It's besides the point. The tool you're using is irrelevant to achieving an outcome. We are the first fund in Europe who has a public healthcare insurance as a cornerstone investor, which tells quite a bit because I think Europe in general, as compared to the US, with their public healthcare systems, has a very outcome focus. And I think that suits us well. We use them quite a lot. Number one. Number two, we believe the physician has a key role in the whole delivery of care, and we believe actually will remain to have a key role in delivery of care. And I think one of the things we need to consider and understand is what role does the physician really play in delivering digital therapeutics or digital care in any way to the patients? Or do we as companies believe we can do that excluding the physician? In Europe, at least, we have a different view on that.
So we'll perhaps come back to that later when we're talking about challenges.
Yeah, so Greg Fleming, I'm with Air Liquide. So Air Liquide is known as an industrial gas company. What most people don't know is that we are very
All of
well.
you speak louder, sorry, but that noise is really hard. So that's really kind of across the board.
Thanks.
Let's see if this one works better.
Just have to speak up.
So
It's very loud back here.
we are a in-home healthcare provider for chronic disease care. A lot of those patients are indeed COPD type patients, but we also manage chronic diabetes care, type 1. We also manage a number of other indications, Alzheimer's disease, et cetera, et cetera. 1.7 million patients in the home. We have been investing in a number of different digital solutions. Most of them so far are around diabetes, but we are looking at various different solutions on how really to draw the patient and the doctor relationship closer and closer. As already commented, in Europe, the primary focus is outcomes. We're being pushed by the insurance payers to show not only that patients are using treatments, but are responding positively to treatments. So we're being challenged very strongly. We also have healthcare businesses in South America and Asia and Canada. But the largest part of our business is across Western Europe.
Great, thanks. So let's talk a little about the current investment climate. So you may have read in the press a number of articles saying digital health hasn't lived up to its promise. Maybe come back to that later. The question would be then, is there money still being invested in digital health? I think the answer is a resounding yes. Just to give you a figure, according to Digital Health Network, which is Mark Sluis's newsletter he sends out, there's a great industry watcher for digital health. And he calculated last year, so 2019, there was about $15 billion invested in digital health. So that's a little down from 2018, where it was about $20 billion. But $15 billion is still a big chunk of change for delivery. Just to put that in perspective, the total VC investments in Europe, again, the figures are variable, the total VC in Europe in 2019 were estimated about $35 billion. global digital health investment is about half of the total VC investment in Europe. So that's big. But before our heads get enormously big and small and thinking how marvelously lucky we all are, it turns out 15 billion is only about half what the US spent on Halloween in 2019. So just keep that in perspective. More than $8 billion spent on one night of party. Okay, so I think there is money out there. You can see we have a panel of digital health investors. We've not run away into the corner to start crying yet. I think just one little observation. A Swedish telehealth company, Cry, just the first kind of big investment announcement since Christmas. They just raised 140 million euros Series C on top of the 60 million they raised as Series B. So I think money's out there, but I'd love to hear what the other panelists think about this. So maybe Tom, what's your feeling? Is the money drying up? Is there plenty more?
No, I think money is out there. There's no question about it. About a third of our investment inquiries a year are digital. So it's by far the biggest category. By far the biggest category. Now, digital is a broad term, from disease companions to managed care to AI analytics on radiology. So it's a broad term. I think the sheer volume will turn something out. We are struggling a little bit, I have to admit, with business models, i.e. how do you make money from whom, i.e. who's paying. To our belief, at least in Europe, the patient unlikely. So it has to be borne by the healthcare system, so it needs some kind of reimbursement formula. I think the health insurance companies are unlikely to pay directly unless they have a benefit right in front of their nose, which in Europe, again, is very different to the US. Managing patients and managing care is done by physicians, not by insurance companies. And I think that's a key difference here, which one needs to consider. Who would be a potential customer?
But bottom line, the money is there.
Yeah,
right.
Last comment on that is, I think, really is interesting, and I have no solution, so don't believe that I know it all. I don't. Delivery of care has been extremely local. We haven't seen any hospital chains or delivery organizations or physicians organizations or any of those really crossing borders. Diseases are global, pharma is global, medtech is global. But delivery of care has been extremely local. Most of the digital care companies are service companies, delivery of care companies. Are they global all of a sudden? What drives that? Don't know. Just a thought.
Okay, so back to is the money out there? Are people enthusiastic to fund? Sure.
Yeah, I would. And can you look at that, hear me now? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I would echo a lot of what Tom was saying, that I think the money is absolutely out there. I think there are more companies than ever in digital health doing fantastic things. I would say, to your point about business models, it has taken digital health a little bit of time to figure out which modes to play in, right? If you think about all the ways a company in this space can actually generate revenue, payers, providers, direct-to-consumer, health plans, and employers, and you can keep going down the line. Figuring out exactly where your moat is takes a little bit of work. And we've seen evidence of companies being able to do that with the IPOs that happened in 2019. And I think now that we've seen that playbook, it's going to be a much more repeatable type of process. But getting to that point has absolutely taken some time. I think now that we're there, though, that is only going to accelerate.
And maybe that's part of this the stuff we read in the press. It's been hard to find out quite who's going to pay and how you're going to defend your position. Gregory, any thoughts on the funding scene and trends?
Well, I agree with everyone else. There's a lot of funding out there, I think, for digital solutions. I would also say that, for those of us that are providers out in the marketplace, we're being pushed by the payers to adopt digital solutions. We agree that they do lead to more efficient sort of systems. However, the first discussion we always have is how do we monetize? How does the business model going to work to pay for the solutions? And it typically is not necessarily an easy solution in front of us a lot of times. But being the ones that have to implement it, we are the ones that are on the ground working and trying to partner with the payers to figure out how do we get these solutions into the marketplace, to test them and to finally prove out business models that are sustainable for everyone and work and provide good results. So the business model is big part of the discussion when she came to implementation.
So we invest less with the payer side, but really more interact with the therapeutics and pharma side. Especially at early stage, we don't need millions of dollars of investment at seed and pre-seed. Most of the deal size is only like low $1 million or even like $400K. So there are definitely enough money to kick off a lot of these very cutting edge, very innovative projects. But one of the challenges that we see is because how new and innovative are these technologies that we're funding at early stage, there's definitely lack of a structural or a big enough pool of investor or institutional investors who are comfortable with both the science side or the scientific side of the innovation and also the technology and data side of the innovation. So for us, there are a small group, handful of tech investors who are comfortable crossing over to life science, and then we also co-invest with a lot of strategic investors, but we would definitely welcome to see more and more investors, institutional investors, and financial investors who feel more comfortable taking both sides of the risk and feeling comfortable taking a deep dive into the technology. So for what we look at, I think money is there, but we definitely want to see more co-investors.
Great, thanks. And just going back on one of your points, you don't need, you don't have very big rounds because you're going at seed stage. But historically, people have regarded, I think, pharma investments as being the really big ticket items. Medtech's a bit cheaper, and digital is cheap. Is that still the case? Because I think at least the serious digital, where there's a need of clinical proof, we perhaps have bigger cash requirements. Anyone want to speak to that?
We have a digital practice next to our healthcare practice, and we always get confronted with how expensive our investments will be. We've done a lot of historical analysis, and by the way, tech investments are as expensive as healthcare investments when it comes to the end of it, because the end of it means adoption. And in healthcare, we speak about adoption in two ways. One is commercial adoption, i.e. revenues, just securely, or scientific adoption, i.e. you find your key opinion leaders who drive this for you and speak at conferences and do the clinical trials and all that. Whereas in tech, it's mostly commercial, i.e. it's revenues. And adoption is difficult. In new technologies, we all know the medical communities are conservative. Rightfully, wrongfully, you can argue this very long, but they are conservative in adopting new technologies. And that means a lot of convincement, and I, as Noble Fark would say, feet on the street. Sales reps convincing one by one that this is a good technology and you should be trying this out. This is how we've done it in the past. I have to admit that I think digital technologies in the commercialization concept haven't really changed anything in terms of driving the adoption. So it's not cheap. It's cheap at the outgo, but that's it.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the IPOs from last year, right? The 6 or so big digital health IPOs, Livongo, Health Catalyst, Change, Phreesia, Progeny, Smile Direct Club, right? Each of those companies roughly raised somewhere between $1 and $400 million before going public. I think in general they've had relatively strong outcomes, as the whole sector has. But that number, it's not exactly right.
Yeah. It's not the short product cycles and rapid on the market we all thought about, perhaps.
I would just say, that building apps and building, digital solutions is only the start. The real cost is in implementing and setting up your data safety structures, etc.
Okay, great. So there's largely optimism that it's going to be expensive. It's going to take us some time to get there. Let's think a little perhaps about how entrepreneurs should approach the investors. Let's say if you want to catch a fish, you need to think like a fish. So how does one think like a digital health investor? The first question would be, when should folk approach you? Should they approach you when they're ready for your investment? So if you're a seed A investor, should they approach you just for seed A, or should they approach you before? Or don't you have time to go through all these things that aren't ready for investment?
We are very early, so we are as early as giving a term sheet to a company that doesn't exist, and we'll tell the founder to fill out the name once they approve it. That's how early we can go. But we definitely work with founders a lot of the time for like a few months, even longer than that, before giving them a term sheet. But we definitely, there are situations where we make a decision within a week or two and then jump in. It really kind of depends, especially when the founder is like relatively green, doesn't have much of a track record, and doesn't have a product that's mature enough to have some sort of technology or product validation yet, coming to us and even at the ideation stage, and so that we can work together, so we can observe you for a little bit longer. And especially for us, we really care about at early stage the team, and a lot of it is the technical expertise, the industry know-how, but also like how fast a learner you are. And it's really hard for me to get an estimate of that by just having one meeting in a snapshot. So it tends to be a little bit. It takes a few weeks to a few months for me to establish a baseline, and after the first, second, third meeting, every time you come back with some more traction, learn or solve or answer a lot of the questions that we talked about and discussed, and also use that time to kind of build up the rapport to get a sense of going down the road if you're an investor in your company or going to sit on the board, and we'll basically will work together for the next at least a year or two. Are we going to be good working partners together?
Great, thanks. Tom, I think Early Bird get a lot of incoming interest. Do you have the time to look at things that aren't ready for your investment?
I guess our name speaks for itself. So Early Bird is an early stage investor. Cold calls usually are not successful. So they have to come out of the network. We need to know the entrepreneurs and the people around it. I can only echo this. We would like to work with them for quite some time. In particular, if they are very early, or we know them from historical investments where they've done something beforehand. So it actually takes a little bit of hand-holding and understanding the business model and helping them out. But we would go early. We do see in all instances. That's no big deal. But we just need to understand the entrepreneurs. It's going to be a marriage for at least 5 to 7 years, if not longer. And we should better know each other well. They should like us, we should like them. Then we have the best ground.
So yes, for a company like Airbnb, I guess one thing I should say is that the Ventures Group is a strategic group. We need there to be a partnership with our business unit for us to make an investment. And I would tell you that the strategic discussion is the long lead item. So I encourage entrepreneurs to engage with our business teams as soon as possible. Maybe even before you have something to demonstrate, you're not likely to get a really serious conversation until you have something that's ready to demonstrate. I still encourage to start the engagement as soon as possible. We need to know you, we need to understand who you are, we need to understand your technology. There needs to be a relationship built for them to start seriously considering.
Just rebound on that. So we're also a strategic venture fund, but we don't require having a business case before investing. So we invest in technologies we think may impact our business, and we hope that within the 2 years following that investment, we maybe have a collaboration going on that helps our core business, but it's absolutely not essential. So just be aware that strategic investors come in different flavors. Some have to have a business case, some don't care at all, and some want to do it but aren't making a precondition for investment. So sure, for pure VC.
Yeah, so I would actually echo a lot of what Tom and Millie said. We love working with founders early on. We, in addition to doing seed through Series B, invest, we'll also incubate. So we will start an idea with a founder, or a founder can come to us with one, and we can incorporate the company alongside them. So, we are naturally on the earlier stage side, so we would encourage folks to come and reach out to us either through our network or through other folks, when they're ready to.
Okay. Great. So just a brief, very practical question. I was on a panel in London just before Christmas. I was surprised by this question and by the answers. So what kind of materials work for you guys? One-pagers, slide decks, 20 slides, 120 slides? I don't know, Tom, you kick us off there. What would you like to see on a first contact?
20 slides, max.
20
My
slides.
attention span is rather short. I need to understand quickly what this is all about and where is the benefit of using this technology. If I can't get this done in 5 minutes, it's likely to be dismissed fast. If I need to really dig into it, I mean, the way I look at it is very easy. I look at the company, what's the technology they're using, what diseases are they addressing. If I'm still interested, I look at the team. And if then I see something which is interesting, let's set up a call. That's the way we operate. We receive only in healthcare 1,200 inquiries a year. So you can roughly imagine how much time I can spend on each individual one, even though I don't do all of them, but a lot. So a slide deck is one pager doesn't cut it because I have about more questions than answers in the one pager. I don't get what this is all about.
Perfect. Yes.
Typically 20 pages.
You have to speak up.
Typically 20 pages stack, like what Tom said. Though we go early, so we definitely have worked with entrepreneurs who don't even have a business deck, and we take academic research papers, we take GitHub links, so we can be very flexible, working with early stage founders at ideation stage. Though I have to say, storytelling is communication is one of the founder qualities that we also look for. And even if you're highly technical, very capable, and very experienced, but as a VC, especially at early stage, I also need to think about if you're capable of raising the next round. So a pitch deck that at least helps as the first step of demonstrating being able to tell a story. But even if you don't have a story yet, we're willing to work with you.
So quickly, Greg, one page or slide deck?
Well, what I would say is the ideal case would be 10 slides. And I would point them to the template that Sequoia Ventures puts out there as their preferred 10 key points that they want to cover. If I look at those are the 10 key points that are very, very useful for us to see.
Okay. Sure. Any last comments?
20 slides sounds great.
Okay. So I think we're all pretty aligned. The panel which I did in London, in fact, we're split half and half, and half the people were very happy to have a one-pager, because that took even less time than 20 slides. And nobody wants 80 or 100 slides. Okay, although I'm sure we've all seen that. Just a little tip. Okay. So I think we talked a little about business model and business plans. What about the team for you guys? So do you need to see a full team? Often you can't hire a team until you have the funding in, right? So obviously a constraint. Is a one-person show, one-woman show, a one-man show good enough to get you excited to invest? Anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think for us, as I mentioned before, we incubate. The example I'm thinking of right now is literally one woman who came to us with an incredible idea, and that's all we needed. In other cases, so for example, if you are a company going direct to consumer in healthcare, I think it is probably a mistake if your leadership team is exclusively consisting of folks who have only operated in healthcare. And that's not a crazy statement. I would want to see some blend of backgrounds between retail, between marketing, between healthcare, of course. So I think thinking about who your end market is and having your management team, and frankly, when it's applicable, your board be comprised of those types of individuals is really important to us.
Anyone else have a comment?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be 20 people in the team, but it needs to be a team. It needs to be more than one person. We need to be able to see that there's the starting point for going from where you are today to where you want to reach as your first next milestone for you're going to raise funds again.
Well, if there is a complete team, that would be great. If not, we think a lot about what are the core or key areas of the next few key hire. And if it's something that we think that's really critical to the company that should be part of the founding team, we'll prefer or that they already have it or the existing founder are capable of finding one. And we also go as early as incubating. So occasionally we'll also just work with the scientists and help them put the team together. But again, it comes down to, if there are certain areas that you can easily hire, that's fine. If it's critical to the business, to the technology, then we would like to have the core team already in place.
Real briefly, single founder is our no-go. It needs to be a team. Second thing we need to check is how amenable is the founder to actually accept others next to him. Or really crucial, because that's, in particular if you're scientific founders, that's sometimes difficult. Other thing, families, no-go.
Yeah, I think from our perspective also we need to have at least part of the team. If there's one or two holes to fill, that's okay. But because we're investing in Series B, we want established companies. We're hoping to be a big pilot or really commercial. You need to have a blend of competences to get that. Okay, let's think about the investor fit blend of competences that you need around the board table as the investors. Amelia, I think we had a conversation about that. Perhaps you'd like to expose your thoughts on what you need as far as investors in a digital health startup.
Like my other co-investors?
Yes, other co-investors. Because it's a blend of tech and health.
Right. Well, I think it really comes down to what is the nature of the technology and the business. It really depends. But let's say if this is a company that has both the therapeutics and also the working with the payer and the provider side, then as a fund, our expertise really is working with pharma companies, tapping into their R&D budget and helping them navigate selling a software product to a lot of the larger R&D organizations. Then having another co-investor from the other end who's familiar with the healthcare system, with the payer, with the provider, that will complement us very well. With certain other companies that we invest in, they're exclusively focusing on the therapeutic side and they only work with pharmas. And we definitely have seen either strategic investors or institutional investors who are familiar with different areas of some diseases that they will go after, so that every investor can bring different expertise to the table, where we, relatively speaking, play more as a data and machine learning expert, helping the team thinking about how to acquire data, monetize the data down the road, and complementing the more pharma life science investors in that case.
So let's we've had quite a bit of talk about how to approach investors and work with investors. Unless anybody on the panel has anything more that I think we need to say. There was something Shira and I discussed, which is, what's the one question you wish the entrepreneurs asked you as an investor but they don't? Is there a question that they don't tend to ask?
Yeah, I can start and share what I was talking to Tom about. Look, in my view, we work for our portfolio companies. Right? We are there to help them be the best they can possibly be. And that's the founder, the team, to everyone else working there. And so I hope every company that talks to us asks us that question: is how are you going to help me? A lot of these meetings tend to focus on what the company does, how it's differentiated, why it's going to make a great investment. But I want to make sure that the entrepreneur is getting something out of us too, right? And so what we do with our portfolio companies is a number of different things. It's everything from, as both of us are former operators, and so thinking through business model and strategy and where the right areas to focus are, but also putting them in touch with their customers, the payers, the providers, the employers. Those are the types of connections we bring to the table, and that's what I think every founder should be asking of every investor they meet as they go through this process and try to make their decisions.
Yeah, I think we on the corporate venture side tend to think we bring all this expertise, which is true. In our case, we're bringing pharmaceutical development expertise, regulatory reimbursement, et cetera, et cetera. But you should always be thinking also the VCs are bringing lots of expertise to operational expertise, business models, all sorts of good stuff. Anyone else got a question that's never asked by the investee, but you wish they would ask? opinion to find out? No? We're good. Okay, then let's go back to digital health, the particularities of digital health. So, what are the particular challenges? We've talked about the fundraising that's actually need more money and more time in digital health than I think we thought at the start. Perhaps it's the popular perception. So what about the adoption? Tom talked a little about this in the beginning. How do you get this out to whoever the customer is? Is it the doctors that have to be intervening? Are there particular tricks or things needed to get adoption of digital health products? Is there a particular strategy to find out who to push it to?
I don't know whether there's a particular strategy. I would love to know it because then I probably do it myself. But I compare this. So we are historically more a device industry, and we have found out that there are certain technologies in the device business, and I'm comparing it to orthopedics. I'm hoping I'm not offending anybody. Where it's rather simple to find your first 5, 10, 20 customers who adopt your technology and use it. So all of a sudden you have a company coming by with 2, 3, 4, 5 million in revenue saying, we've shown this works. Look at our revenues. That is only half the story, i.e. what comes after the 5 million or what comes after 10 million. I think that's kind of like the borderline. I.e. how do you scale it beyond your friends, those who you know well, those who have supported you, those insurance companies you've done a small contract with to drive early adoption. It's all good. I'm not trying to be negative, but how do you scale it beyond that? I think is really the most crucial question. And I mean, the question people always ask is kind of like the same question the insurance companies will ask us: show me. Show me. If you have new technology, a new approach to treat patients, care, don't show me a clinical trial on diabetics, because clinical trial on diabetics means everybody is adherent. Well, the real world looks a little bit different. So, show me is the most critical question, and you have to be scrutinized by that question, not only with trials, because trials is an artificial setting. And in particular, when you want to drive therapies, really, really tough. I don't have the answers, by the way, again. I'm not pretending to know it all, but it's tricky.
So the magic formula from Tom?
Yeah, I would echo that, is that we often have entrepreneurs come to us and talk about projected timelines for adoption. Let's just say we've learned to be skeptical and to ask a lot of questions. In general, I think the medical community is making great strides about the familiarity of adoption of digital solutions, but we still have a long ways to go. And so we're very, very careful about the assumptions around the adoption.
Most of our portfolio, they tap to the R&D budget of pharma, and the client side, a lot of them don't even have the designated budget for this kind of software procurement. And we've seen clients from having, let's say, anywhere from $50 million a year to like $200 million a year of innovation, scouting, or pilot kind of budget at pharma. But then, how does it scale? Are you selling to the head of the R&D, or are you really selling to the innovation team? And hopefully we'll find different areas of diseases or R&D pipelines that we can scale this. Especially at early stage, I think we are more open if we don't have a clear answer, but at least keeping that in mind of, okay, are you tapping to the innovation budget, or are you tapping to the R&D budget, or where else can you take this technology and scale it? So that's what therapeutics and work on.
Okay. So Tom talked about the difficult transition from the friends at the 5 or 10 million stage. What about before that? How do you get around pilotitis, which we certainly see in our portfolio of companies? Pharma companies are often the target of digital health approaches, and they all love doing pilots because they're, I was going to say risk averse. I come from a pharma company, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I think it's fundamental in business. How do you get on beyond pilots and get onto commercial contracts? A bit earlier than the breakpoint Thomas spoke. Sure.
Yeah, so I think this is actually quite related to the last question, and for me, what it comes down to is having a very clear articulation of what your value prop is and who your actual user is. If you can't do that, to me, that's when you end up getting stuck in these endless cycles of, oh, we'll try this, we might use it here, we might do it there. But for the companies that I've seen who have done phenomenally well are the ones who have are able to say with clarity, this is where we are focused. This is why we will save you money or save you time or some combination thereof. And this is exactly who it's for. Those are the companies who know exactly who they're targeting in the sales cycle, can get to the sales cycle more quickly, and aren't jumping between all the different modes of commercialization that we were talking about before.
Any other comments?
Well, I 100% agree, but also I think at early stage, it is very hard to say, well, this worked in 2 areas, and we know for sure it's going to work in 20 other areas. So there are definitely a lot of risk upfront, and just takes time to explore. Especially for us, we also think about, or encourage the portfolio companies to think about through all different pilots or commercial contracts, what is the value of your data? If there's something that's through the data aggregation, if there's a network effect, or if there's a bigger potential, bigger picture down the road, other than a linear scale of your revenue.
Scalability and effects of scale. All right, so we have about less than 10 minutes left. I'll leave some time for questions from the audience. So let's get our crystal balls out for a moment and see what the panel feels about what the future looks like. You know, someone said to me the other day, the only people that know the future are the CEOs of startups. So to some extent we're privileged because we all talk to a lot of CEOs of startups. So on the panel, anybody have any thoughts of what future technologies are going to be interesting in the next, say, 2 to 3 years? Where you think investment dollars are going to go and anything impact? In the digital health area. I'm sure you can think of other areas too.
So if you ask me, I think there is digital therapeutics are going to come. I think they need more clinical data so that they can be prescribed by physicians. As long as you're trying to do this in a direct-to-consumer business model, I have my questions. It may be a start, but at the end of the day, it needs to be engraved into the healthcare systems, and that will only happen if they are somewhat in the reimbursement system. Number 1. Number 2, I personally share a vision is that I actually believe a physician will be not only physically seeing patients, but digitally seeing patients. So when it comes to monitoring chronic diseases, that will not happen only physically as it is happening today. It will happen digital. Again, all of that will require that the physician is going to get paid for it, otherwise he's not going to get it done. I don't see a reason why a physician would sit 2 hours in front of his computer monitoring patients which are remote and is not seeing a dime for it. That's not going to work. But that, I think, will happen. So compliance tools, management tools will come. I am 100% sure. The systems are just very slow. And by the way, not only in Europe, here, I think that's a global thing.
Really, you were in tech funds, so perhaps you see some interesting stuff that we don't see that's going to transition into healthcare.
Yeah, well, in general, we definitely see a lot of inefficiencies or existing process that can be done much cheaper, faster, better, that's enabled by technology throughout this entire drug discovery process. But also thinking about more like system biology way of drug discovery through looking at really large real world data and flip the model and start from there and think about how do you approach precision medicine. I think that's actually very interesting, and we're working with some scientists on it. Still early but promising.
Sure, you have crystal balls?
Yeah, well, no, not really. But what I do see happening is in the next 3 to 5 years, at least for us, we really look at the next few years as being critical in terms of widespread implementation of some solutions that we have today. I think that's probably true across the industries. You're finally getting into place a lot of widespread sort of implementation. And so I don't necessarily, certainly new solutions are going to be welcome, but I think there's going to be real critical focus around data safety and implementation.
Yeah, so one of the trend lines that we're following quite closely is the intersection of healthcare and consumer. In other words, how the demand from consumers for healthcare services is going to change. And Tom, you mentioned this earlier in the panel. We very much also believe that the way in which consumers experience their care is not going to be the same in a few years. Doctors aren't going anywhere. No one's here to replace them. Or certainly we're not here to replace them. But we do believe that by augmenting what they do, whether through digital front doors or through other means, that we're going to have a much more consumer-like experience in healthcare rather than a lot of what we see today.
Great, thanks. So just a quick thumbs up, thumbs down from the panel. Do we think digital health will really lower costs and improve the quality of care? Just yes or no? Okay, so we're not quite unanimous on that question. Okay, with that, I'd like to open for questions from the audience. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you. This is very interesting. Building on some of the points you shared. So my name is Sangeeta, founder of RESI. My question is this. Chirag, you talked about where investors can come in and help. And Millie, you talked about how you want to focus on the investors that have expertise in your area. So we are a cancer digital therapeutics company. Our current focus is on employers because we know we can add a significant amount of value. We are post-revenue, but we also know that there is a huge opportunity in pharma, and we want to go there only after we have raised a round and have sufficient resources to devote to it. So my question for you then is, when you're looking for investors, do you look for investors who are employer space and say you're going to go to pharma investors later, or do you also talk to investors who have experience in pharma because they can then bring the revenue and bring the connection? So that's first question.
Just repeat the question so people go back here. So essentially the question is, they're working with employers, they're developing digital therapeutics, they want to transition to pharma as a customer or add additional as a customer. And the question is, what investors should she approach? Should she approach investors that are in the employer space where they currently have a business, or in the pharma space where they want to go? Is that a question for anyone in particular? Or?
No, everyone.
Yeah. Well, we definitely see a lot of companies in a very similar stage that you're not necessarily going after pharma yet, but there's definitely a big potential. And for us, and that's where a lot of the entrepreneurs really appreciate our expertise and experience, especially working with pharma and especially with data, even though you may not actually monetize on it until, let's say, 2-3 years later, but you probably need to start thinking about it early on, because there are a lot of issues with how do you acquire the data, compliance, and make sure everything is what the pharmas actually can use. So thinking about it early on, and especially as part of your core strategy down the road, I would definitely encourage you to, while working with investors who are familiar with the employer side, but work with investors who are also familiar with the other side early on.
Great. So we're more or less out of time, but again, we have a little buffer before lunch. If anybody wants to ask one more short, quick question, so we'd be happy to field that. Over there.
How do you feel about the truly big tech platforms? They're focused on healthcare. Do you worry about it? Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple?
That's a rather big question. A very quick answer from anybody on the call? Tom?
Maybe this is the right city to say this. I would actually argue that they're probably going to be very much in the wellness being side. And as soon as it's becoming a real disease thing, i.e. liability, regulatory, all clinical trials, all of the crap which happens after that, which is difficult for those guys, that will take a while. I think data analysis and all of that, that's where they're strong in. They're going to get into this. And as soon as it becomes into the whole regulatory disease management, where all the difficulties, liability, and all of that come into play, I think this is going to be a barrier for them still to decide to overcome or not, even though they're spending money in those fields, I know that. But whether they're going to be really active there, I don't know.
Very well reasoned plan. Anyone have a diversion opinion on that?
I don't know if it's divergent so much as a just different point of view. I think it's fantastic that they are spending a lot of time and resources in this area. I think they finally recognize that healthcare is where a lot of them can make a really big mark. And I think companies with those kinds of resources, to the extent that they can put those toward a massive amount of scale, is incredible. And I think it gives a lot of rise to digital health companies. I think it gives them a new moat to play in. You've seen a lot of the companies you mentioned actually strike partnerships with earlier stage startups and co-developing technologies that are actually doing great work in our health systems. So I welcome it, and I hope more of the larger folks in this space start doing it.
And our viewpoint is very similar, is that we think there can be a very synergistic sort of approach with some of those new players, and we're very hopeful, so we also engage in the discussion.
Okay, super. So we're well out of time, so just thank you all for coming, and thank the panel members for sharing their wisdom with us.